Hello and welcome to another edition of the C Squared podcast. This is your host, Curtis, with my co-host, Aliyah, and we are here with Joshua Toomey of the Talk to Me podcast. He's going to be talking to us for the next, 40 minutes or so about his career, which has been in both metal and in podcasting, and I guess some Twitch streaming too. So he's done a few things, been around the block. He's going to tell us some stuff. So first of all, Mr. Toomey, we would like to thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always great to come on podcast. It's funny to hear someone say my career. I like that.
Career. Well, that's actually the very first question we want to go into. Can you give us a little nutshell version of who you are, what you do, the peanut version?
Well, currently I host the Talk to Me podcast presented by notfest.com. Also on the Notfest official Twitch with my show Throwback Throwdown with Toomey. Both shows are interview based, just kind of going like you said, like the nuts and bolts of how people got to where they are today and things like that, and just interview some of my favorite bands. So that's where I am now. How about that?
Cool. So you've been doing this for how long, the podcasting and stuff?
The podcast just turned 6 years old. So
okay.
I got in it, not the infancy, but like a little bit before a few people.
Cool. So now even going back even further than that, you were originally in a band. Can you kind of talk about that briefly too as part of your nutshell?
Yeah. I'll kind of go back. I mean, obviously most people have heard of Primer 55 if you're into nu metal. Prior to that, I was in a local band in Nashville called 12 Volt Negative Earth, and we got to open for, like when the Misfits came back around in the late 90s, and shows with like Earth Crisis and Hatebreed and Limp Bizkit and all those bands. So I got into meeting bands then, and then I was actually in that band for a good 4 or 5 years right out of high school, actually in high school and right out of high school. And then in 2002, I joined Primer 55, did some touring with those guys, and yeah, met a lot of fun people while doing that.
Nice. So if anybody who's listening, my cats are fighting in the background. So if you hear that, just don't mind them. Yeah, it's just they picked the best time to start the fight. So now move forward a little bit here. So now you're on the Notfest Twitch channel. So how did you go from becoming a podcaster into becoming a Twitch streamer?
I had like I said, kind of started the podcast really just out of the blue. I was working a job, excuse me, and was really getting into podcasts, and I was like, you know what, I could probably do this. I've met enough people in the music business. I've toured with enough people. I've played shows with enough people, and I could reach out to friends and have them on the show and kind of get the basis of the interview the guests on the show. So I went on Amazon, bought like a $25 mic, downloaded free editing software, I recorded the original interviews on my phone with like a recording app, and just did recorded phone calls. And then slowly but surely I would watch other people's podcasts, or if somebody took a photo of their podcast studio, I would try to figure out what their gear was. I mean, this was the video based podcast really hadn't hit yet. So it was a lot of audio stuff. So I was still trying to figure out, what everybody was using and kind of build it from there, and built it up. And then over the little bit pre-pandemic, we started really getting into video and really trying to bring more video in. And then once the pandemic hit, everybody was doing video. Everybody was, good with all, seemed like they put out a ton of streaming websites to where you could stream your stuff to stream like StreamYard, and you could stream to YouTube and Facebook. And I was doing a little bit of streaming that way. And then somewhere in the midst of that, Bees I had met him through his old show, That's Not Metal. Had a good relationship with him. And then I saw that he had started doing a lot of stuff with notfest.com, and I was like, I really liked what they were doing. Actually, I found a message the other day from like a year and a half ago, trying to figure out who I needed to talk to at Notfest to kind of get in that circle. And so Bees was building up his show, and then he started doing the Twitch thing. And then I think, Bees and the Knotfest guys really started talking about getting a kind of an MTV style Twitch stream, like 5 days a week from 4 to 12 Eastern, from 4 to midnight Eastern, trying to just get content. So once they needed content, they started reaching out to people they knew. Bees was like, hey, I would like to get you in on this. I'm like, hey, I would love to do that. Everything kind of fell into place. And then right about the time we were about to launch, that's when Bees left and I stayed. And it's been kind of a blessing because he and I interview a lot of the same people. So I was very nervous about that going into Knotfest because he and I have very similar musical tastes. And so if he's there, he probably gets first dibs on things. And if I'm there, I've kind of got the scraps coming. So as soon as he left, I was like, well, that kind of opens up, not only do they need me for the Knotfest Twitch, but they're also kind of lacking in that, the podcast side of it too. So just, as we're getting the Twitch, because the Twitch channel took like 4 months to kind of get together with all the planning and the, making sure everybody's shows were in order, and we're going to launch on this date and we're going to launch on that date. It kind of kept getting pushed back and back. And so in that time, I'm like, hey, check out my podcast. I would like to do some stuff. And it was always like, hold off. We're doing the Twitch stream. And then after my first episode, I logged off. I was like, that was the worst thing anyone's ever done live ever. And, just the critic that I am of myself. And then my phone just blows up like, everybody loved it. Oh my God, let's definitely talk about getting your podcast over and things like that. So
awesome.
So yeah, it was definitely fun, man. So, but basically the other thing that kind of came with this was as the pandemic was going, I was upgrading the computer, I was upgrading the internet, I was upgrading my camera. And then like right when I basically bought the whole new setup, Knotfest Twitch came calling. Like it was like what do they say? It's like when opportunity meets, what is it, luck or something? I don't know. The preparation and all that stuff is there. So it was like, it just kind of came together at like a perfect time.
Perfect. Okay. So I'll let Aliyah ask her question next.
Well, I can't just start at my questions because it's totally out of context, but I do have a question about that. Do you feel like, obviously the podcast space is kind of overcrowded at this point in time. So what do you think is the key if somebody wanted to start a podcast to having it be successful?
I mean, I think it just kind of goes back to the same rules that have kind of always applied to podcasting. It's have a schedule, build up a fan base, interact with the listeners. I mean, in my podcast, I mean, obviously getting big guests on and making news and getting on Blabbermouth and the PRP and Metal Injection and all those sites drives traffic to the show. So, with my show, I mean, it's obviously interview based. So, obviously the bigger the interview guest, the bigger the episode. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just consistency, having a good mic, learning how to talk and just being interesting. And I think that even though it's like there's a million bands, but bands still rise to the top. Now there's a million podcasts. So if you put out a good podcast, Curtis is going to hear it. He's going to text you and say, hey, I just checked out this podcast today. Aliyah's going to check it out. She's going to send it around to her friends. And then next thing you know, you've got a listener base. So I think as with anything, cream rises to the top.
Sure.
I have a follow-up on that. So so how did you first get these big guests? Because you were mentioning that it's, it sounded to me like you were kind of saying the podcast kind of grew to the big guests. So how did you get the first big guest?
I mean, that goes back to touring and stuff. And so, the first guest was kind of a more underground band, but they were a local band. Second guest, Billy Gray, that's now the guitarist of Fozzy, played in Primer 55 with me for a little bit. So me and Billy go way back. So I text Billy and I'm like, hey, I'm going to do a podcast. Would you do it? Yes. Episode 3 was guitarist of Hatebreed, Frank from Hatebreed, who I had just kind of struck up a friendship with online over the years. Episode 4, Fred Corey from Cinderella. Fred Corey, the drummer of Cinderella, produced some of my early bands. So, hey, Fred, will you do my podcast? Episode 5, Bobby Burns of Private 55. Soulfly, that's an easy one. Episode 6, Chris Cale, Five Finger Death Punch. I mean, episode 6, you got a Five Finger Death Punch, remember? But I know him because his old band, my old band, used to trade shows. When I left my old band, the local band I was talking about in Nashville, to join Primer, he actually replaced me in my old band. So, I mean, like I go way back with a lot of these guys. So, first 10 episodes, you've got a pretty good out of the gate guest list, which, I mean, not everybody can do, but I mean, with social media and everybody kind of wanting to be on podcasts and things like that. I mean, there were so many times where you'd sit on Facebook and you'd be like, I wonder whatever happened to, insert guitarist from band you liked when you were a kid, and you find them on Facebook and you're like, hey, will you do my podcast? And like, oh my God, somebody actually wants to talk to me about my old band. Yes, I'll do your podcast, So I mean, that's where it started for me. But with Facebook, Twitter, all the social medias, I think that, that back in the day, but, growing up reading Metal Edge magazine, I mean, you weren't going to just call, Kirk Hammett from Metallica, but now, you can find your ways to a lot of your favorite bands, online.
100%. And I think one thing that people don't realize is what you just said, is that a lot of people want to be on podcasts or whatever if you just ask them. And it's a lot of times you can't get like the A-list people when you start out. You can start with someone that's a bit smaller and then kind of grow on the back of that. Aliyah, do you have a follow-up?
I do. Actually, that's a perfect opportunity to ask my question. Other than having a very popular artist as a guest, what do you think makes an interview fun and interesting?
I mean, I think most of the time, when it's not just you have 10 questions written down and you're like, what was your first guitar? What was your major influence? Just having a conversation with people. I listen to especially when I first got into podcasting, there weren't, I mean, it's still 2015, there were still a ton, but there weren't as many as there are now. But, and I have a job where I can listen to podcasts all day long if I want to. So, at some point you kind of run out. And I really got into listening to wrestling podcasts, and I don't even love wrestling. I just like good stories and stories being told about, the early days of making $20 a night wrestling for, traveling and all that stuff. It's like I find that I will listen to any podcast that has a very just a good conversation. The interviewer knows what he's doing. He or she knows what he's doing, and can kind of get that stuff out of them. Because, there's been many a time where, you'll get a guest on your podcast and you'll go back and what you did, Aliyah, where you go back and you listen to past interviews to kind of get a feel about how the way they talk, the way their cadence, the way that the rhythm of the way they speak. And sometimes you find some stuff and you're like, God, this is going to be a rough one because this person does not talk, or you just give you bad answers or yes or no answers. And so I've been nervous like that. And then, recently I had a guest on the Twitch that was a lot like that. And I was very nervous to bring him on, and he ended up talking more than I did because I just sparked a few things that got him going, and he, he just wouldn't stop. So, and it ended up being probably one of my favorite interviews I've done in a long time. So, I'm definitely not going to go in and know every single detail about every single album that a band has done. But if I have a favorite album, or I saw them on tour, anything that just kind of get that different, conversation out of them, rather than just, what are your influences? What was it like? All the what was it like questions, and just trying to not stay away from the major milestones of the band, but mix in a little bit of, hey, I saw that you guys did Warped Tour 2005. That was with blah blah blah. Katy Perry was on that one. Did you ever have any interaction with her? Oh my God, yeah, it was crazy. We were catering. Trying to find just a little different avenue with your questions.
So Aaliyah, I think now would be a good time to go on to the new metal question if you wanted to, because but just as a first thing, I'm not a big fan of new metal, just as a starting point here, but you guys can nerd out as much as you guys want. Aaliyah can take over the question.
I wouldn't say that I'm per se a fan of new metal. However, I have noticed it's had a massive resurgence in recent years. And I wonder if you have any theories on why it's happening now.
You know, I actually had the vocalist of the band Saul on the Twitch stream the other night, and they're a newer band that have some of that new metal in there. And I think a lot of it is those kids that were 8, 9, 10, 11 are now in their late 20s and their bands are getting popular. And so they're going to have a little bit of Linkin Park in them, and they're going to have a little bit of Papa Roach in them and things like that. So I think we went through a phase of, like, if I told you 10 years ago that I was in Primer 55 for a minute, most people would be like, ugh, you know, like scoff at them or scoff at me. But now it's like, oh my God, you were Primer 55. That's awesome, man. They were, you know, they were this, they were that. So it's definitely kind of hit that, you know, that mark. Like I told you, I met, all right, I did some stuff with Fred Corey from Cinderella in the 90s, and glam in the 90s was like, you just stay away from. I mean, even when we told people in the late 90s that we were working with Fred Corey from Cinderella, they were just like, ew, why would you do that? And then now, like, we hit that point where new metal or you know, glam was cool again. And I think that new metal is kind of in that area where it's kind of like the nostalgia factors there, and you just don't have you've went through a few more phases in music, you know, with you know, the death cores and the hardcores and then this is and that's, and even like emo phases and things like that. So you've had different music, and then so, and a lot of those guys were also listening to new metal. But then it's like Limp Bizkit puts out an album and everybody all of a sudden loves it, and you're like, where were you guys like 5 years ago when you guys were all dogging Limp Bizkit? You know, now it's like, oh, it's okay, it's okay to like Limp Bizkit again. Curtis, it's okay to like Limp Bizkit again.
I want to point out I did like the Limp Bizkit album, and
Curtis
I think
has always liked Limp Bizkit.
I never said I didn't like Limp Bizkit. I said I'm a fan of new metal, but I did like Limp Bizkit. Did I not tweet to you about the fucking new?
Yeah, you did actually. Yeah, you did. Okay, I'll take it back.
I think what'd you think of it? I think I said great. But anyways, anybody who's listening to this, if you've not heard the new Limp Bizkit, go check it out. Toomey even approves. Aliyah, what did you think?
They don't need your PR on this podcast.
Did you listen to it, Aliyah?
No.
No?
No.
You're missing out. Really fun album.
I know I'm missing out. I need to listen to it. I keep meaning to. It just,
it's like a quick listen. I think it's like right at 30 minutes. You know,
yeah.
It's very fast paced. It's not anything you've got to sit down.
I've listened to reviews of it and I haven't listened to it.
It's not something you have to sit down and take notes with and try to decipher lyrics. It's just a fun listen.
The second I had it on, I was like, boom. First time I've done that in ages. It was fucking so good. So much fun. I got Lindsay School to listen to it. I got Gaia to listen to it. I was like messaging everybody like midnight on Saturday night. I said,
I was at a Halloween party. Thanks.
Oh yeah, that's right. You were at a Halloween party. Like, oh, that was right.
Yeah.
I forgot that you were like, what are you doing? Anyways, back to Josh.
Right.
Back to Josh. We were talking about the new metal revival. So I have a question as to what do you think would be a good modern new metal band if such a thing exists?
Good modern new metal band. I get we get like a ton of promos and you hear a lot of new metal in the newer music. It's not necessarily like a straight up new metal band, and new metal is such a broad term anyway, because you know, you had Limp Bizkit, but you also had Slipknot, you also had Static X, and you know, none of those bands sound the same, but yet they're all kind of considered the same type of music. So I'm trying to think like From Ashes to New is a pretty decent newer band. I think that some of the Memphis Mayfire stuff, it's kind of got that new metal tinge to it. Tetrarch, Dead, Cane Hill. Trying to think of I'm trying not to leave anything out. But I would say that like it's like a new metal tinge revival. I don't think it's like 100% like we're all putting on our Adidas tracksuits again, you know?
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
we
I
could.
get what you're saying.
Leah, what are we missing on this part?
No, it's just the principle of the endless fusion of metal. Like all the genres are getting blended here and there and everywhere. So we're getting
Yeah.
nothing entirely new, but new manifestations of sort of the same things.
Right.
In
Yeah,
combination.
it's like a lot of the newer stuff has kind of got like a little bit of that you know, like a little bit of gent mixed with
Yep.
like a little bit of new metal and like and everything sounds so good like with all the plugins and you know amp modelers and things like that. Like the recording process has just made everything sound so good. So I think they're really I think it's a really good time for newer music if you like, if you're just in it for sonics and you want to hear good music. And you know in the last 5 or so years really doing the show and you know the new band will come along and you're like, all right, let me check out this new band, and you're like really surprised when you hear, because I mean there was definitely a period in my early 30s, late 20s, early 30s where I just kind of, you know, I was working all the time and starting, you know, and just not really paying as much attention as I have been for the last 6 years to music. So I could have easily fallen into that. There was no good music after insert X date here. You know, there's I know a lot of people like that. I have a lot of friends like that you know, they will go back to the same 7 albums over and over. And now I catch myself really getting into a lot of the newer bands and being really you know, impressed with a lot of the newer bands. I do find myself wondering if I like the band or if I like that they were nice to me on the podcast. So there's like a weird like is this band good or were they just nice? Like, you know, it's like, you know, there's definitely that line you got to find too.
So, Aaliyah's gonna ask something. I'll be quiet.
Oh, well, like you can go ahead.
Well, this is gonna go totally off the rails with my next question. So if you want to keep it on the rails for another minute.
I was just gonna say, I feel like that does color things a little bit, but not entirely. Because if a band is assholes to you, but their music is really good, you're still gonna know their music is really good. You might not enjoy listening to it anymore, but objectively, You're gonna know, yeah, it's good music. So I don't think you need to worry about that. You're probably not too biased. I think you know.
Right.
But go ahead, Curtis.
So I was going to mention, so the first time I met Toomey, quote unquote, met was when he was listening to Spirit Box with Corey on,
right.
I can't remember the name of the show that you first listened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, he was listening to Spirit Box, and let's hear your thoughts on Spirit Box for a minute here. Toomey, I want to hear Aliyah's thoughts if she has any on Spirit Box.
I mean, I can't really give too fair of a judgment. I mean, I listened to the album the one time and I never really went back to it. So, you know, the first listen at the time, I mean, I definitely was not into it. I was expecting something way different than what we got.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I there have been a few albums we've done on first listen that I went back and checked out a few times, but yeah, Spirit Box is not one of them.
So
I do have opinions also.
I want to hear your opinion on the Spirit. Before I get into the next question, Aliyah, I want to hear your opinion on it. And I'm not going to shit talk Spirit Box. I just want to say that starters.
I think to me, I have that inherent bias of like people who are not metalheads are telling me to listen to this band.
Yeah.
And so then I'm automatically like a little bit more skeptical about it.
Right.
There's a level of sensationalism about it, but I like some of the songs. I will say I like some of the songs quite a bit. And obviously she's an incredible, Courtney LaPlante is an incredibly talented vocalist. And so I enjoy listening to it sometimes, but I don't even know if I listened to the full album, or if I did, it just didn't make an impression on me as an album.
Yeah, it seems to go either way with people. It's either they love it or they're kind of like indifferent to it. So the leading on this, Josh, is so when you're doing like a show like that where it's kind of like you're not really interested in the album, but you're kind of supposed to be promoting the album at the same time. How does one do that professionally without shit talking, but still not showing a high level of interest necessarily, if that makes sense?
I mean, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that show is to promote the album. I mean, I think it's truly to
Fair.
to really be a first listen reaction to an album. And but I mean, we've rarely shit talked bands on that show. I mean, we've definitely, when Keem does it, him and I kind of make fun of stuff or mess around. But I mean, if we like it, we love it, and if we don't like it, we'll end up talking about Universal Studios Florida or something. Like we'll tangent off onto things and really just we'll definitely give our opinions of the album, but we'll definitely, and maybe even just have more fun with it. Like, can't believe they're doing this, and we've had some albums. The way that we're not promoting things is we did the latest Beartooth album, and Keem and I just didn't like it. First listen, we weren't into it. And I like some of the Beartooth stuff in the past, so it wasn't just like I don't like the band, but we're just not feeling this album. And then the next thing you know, notfest.com is just album of the year and everything else. So I mean, they didn't come in like into our ears or anything and be like, maybe you should change your tune on that one. But yeah, we kind of went south on that album, and the next thing you know, Knotfest socials are just promoting the shit out of it. So
interesting. The reason why I said that is because I don't know, for some reason I thought it was like you guys were doing that as a promotional tool and you guys got pitched in the whole 9 yards, but I guess not.
No, I mean, that's anything with Knotfest Twitch is pretty much, they have yet to say interview this person on your show. Like they've never said, hey, on Thursday, can you talk to X? It's always me going to them saying, hey, this week I've got this person. There was one week, I think, where I was kind of coming down to the wire and I said, hey, can you guys give me a hand finding somebody? So they helped with Sonny from POD. Like that was the one time that they said, hey, Sonny's looking for, they're promoting the 20th anniversary of Satellite. But yeah, every other week is, they've never said play this video. They've never said interview this guest. Even first listen is, we've got a group chat that's like, hey, this album, what are you guys thinking for this week? And, a lot of times there's not a lot coming out. Sometimes there is a lot coming out. So yeah, that's the one thing with Knotfest Twitch is there's a lot of freedom there that I like, that they're not coming in saying, hey, make sure you promote this tour or make sure you promote this or promote that. They are giving me the, before I joined up with them, I mean, it's, 5.5, almost 6 years of interviewing, and they like what I did. So, they're not trying to change anything. And I come with them and I say, hey, they said this, and this on the episode, let's clip this. I mean, even the clips that are on YouTube are what I've clipped from the interviews to put up. So yeah, a lot of free reign over there to just really, do what I do, I guess.
That's awesome. Leah, do you got a couple questions? We're running out of time. We got like 5 minutes.
Oh, I did want to, I feel like maybe the purpose of these shows in general is more to build a community and kind of have that sort of vibe where you're communicating with the scene. They're getting a feel on what you like, and people and the scene in general and the culture, to just kind of cultivate that. I know Pedro from AMP Reacts mentioned that as a reason why they do their channel, is to sort of support the metal community and give that feeling of like, we're talking about the thing that we love, not necessarily to promote the thing we love or like the band specifically, but just to promote the culture of the thing we love.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I've noticed with bands that have like I'll have an artist on that might be a bigger name on Twitch, but like the chat room kind of stays the same. but I can tell the artists that have a good, strong Twitch following that say, "Hey, I'm going to be on the Knotfish Twitch tonight." It's like as soon as they enter the room, the chat just blows up. With some of the people that you maybe wouldn't even expect, like, but they've got that. I think Twitch is great for bands to jump on, and every couple of nights a different member jumps on. Like I think Atreyu's doing it really well. The Agonist does it really well. A lot of bands out there that just really work of Mice and Men are on there now, I think. And so there's a lot of bands that are kind of popping on. And I sat there and watched the drummer of Mice and Men stream the other day, and he was just playing videos and just talking about stuff, and it wasn't anything groundbreaking, but the chat was going crazy, and the fans, it's just another layer. If when I was 15 and Pantera had a Twitch, I'm going to be there 24/7, just like waiting to see what they're up to, so I think it's great for bands to jump on and just really connect, especially over this, the last year and a half, where if you can't tour, you got to figure something out. And I think a lot of fans of bands are really going to get out. I was talking to Vicky from the Agonist about Twitch, and because bands that have done Twitch are now getting out and getting on tour. And so now a lot of those people that are in the chat room are in the crowd. And so people are coming up to Vicky and be like, "Hey, I'm, Alien 123 on Twitch." And you're like, "Oh, okay," faces to names type thing. Another thing you said, I don't think you were going that way with it, but the other thing you said in there that I've always loved about kind of the metal community, podcasting, radio, video, like that's the one thing that I did not expect when I got into podcasting, was the camaraderie between other podcasters, other media members, just everyone out there that see, like they'll see my name on Blabbermouth and see my name on this and see my name on that. So when I talk to them, like, "Oh, that's you, blah, blah, blah." And really just bouncing ideas off of people. There's a great thing every year in Nashville called the Rock and Pod Expo. It's where all these podcasters descend on like a Hilton hotel for a weekend. And that's the community I didn't expect. I did not, I kind of thought you would just kind of get into this and be a lone wolf type deal. And then really, hey, I see you had this guy on your podcast. What's the PR on that? How's everything going? Let's brainstorm on how to get more listeners, like all those things that I just didn't expect. And then just friendships too, just straight up, I know what people's football teams they like. So I'll dog them on, I'll send them a text or just seeing people's families and things like that. Like that's the side of podcasting I didn't expect.
So I have a final question before Aliyah asks her final question. So I'm curious. So how do you, like, I know sometimes when you're doing the Twitch, it can be hard to get the chat room going. So how does one do that if it's just dead?
Honestly, I haven't really figured that one out yet either.
Fair.
I mean, the thing with my show, a lot of it is not necessarily a lot of crowd participation.
Fair.
I've noticed like with some with some of the Twitch shows, I mean, obviously you'll tune in and the chat is just emojis and bitmojis and all that stuff just going crazy. Mine is an interview based show, so you will get people commenting on maybe what the guest just said. I'm always open to having, if you jump in the chat and you see I'm talking to somebody, you have a question for them that I may not answer or ask, throw it in the chat. And I'll always say, "Hey, Curtis in the chat's asking, and a lot of times I like those questions because they are the generic questions I was talking about earlier that you want to stay away from. But sometimes those questions will spark that tangent, So a lot of times I'll have people come in the chat and they'll be like, hey, blah, 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 what was your favorite tour you've ever done? And, that's something I'm probably not going to ask my own, but I'll ask it with the caveat of, Curtis is asking, what's the favorite tour you've ever done? And then they'll mention a tour, and it maybe spark some of me, and then that'll spark into the conversation. I had a Blabbermouth article over some I had Frank Bello from Anthrax on the show, and I was asking about one thing, and then the chat room hit about another hit off of that. And so the question I asked from the chat room ended up being the Blabbermouth headline. so
Nice.
so I was like, I'll take that all day. It's just talking about like when Anthrax toured with Kiss and stuff like that. But yeah, so yeah, I like when the chat's going. I'm definitely not as animated as like a Daniel Decay when it comes to the chat, because his chat is just going nonstop. But a lot of that's, he's actually talking with the chat, and everybody's like, it's like a two-way conversation with the chat room, to where a lot of times on my show, a couple of guests on, playing a couple of videos, talking here and there. I like where it's at though. I like what's going on over there on my Twitch show.
Fair enough. So I think I'm done my questions because we're running out of time. So Leah's going to ask you a final question.
I have a very important final question. McDonald's or Wendy's?
If
those are your only two options.
See, this is a tough one because, like, I know Wendy's is like talking about this like new fries that they have, and I haven't tried them. I haven't had Wendy's in forever. I liked like Wendy's fries like 2 fries ago.
Okay.
And I honestly, I think I like Wendy's better, but I have kids, so we stop at McDonald's more often. So,
Sure.
but I think I'm gonna go Wendy's on the if I had the choice between Wendy's burger and fries over McDonald's burger and fries.
Yeah.
Plus Wendy's, you can throw in the chili.
Yep.
Yeah.
They have some decent chicken nuggets.
No.
So yeah, so I think I'm going Wendy's.
Yeah. I asked this question was prompted by a photo I saw on your Instagram with a Frosty.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is an important question that I should ask because we have opinions in my house. And but regardless of that, have you tried the vanilla Frosty?
I have not had I think I know a photo you're talking about from a very young me.
Looking for it right now.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how many Frosties I've had over the years. So, but I think that was very much a time of the Frosty.
Sure.
It was more of that was probably more of a time where we stopped wherever, was the closest, and we all had $5 in our pockets. So,
yeah, it's a relevant touring question.
yes, very much a touring question.
So before we end off, Aliyah, do we have anything final that we want to ask Mr. Toomey?
I think I'm good with my questions. Do you have anything?
No, I just got you.
Joshua, do you want to rep anything at the end of the podcast? Do you want to let the people know what you have going on, what they should check
out? Yeah, I mean, obviously the Knotfest Twitch, which is every Thursday night, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific. Twitch.tv/NotFestOfficial. You can always find my podcast, talktomepod.com, or any podcast apps you have. I actually just really noticed that Spotify is my second most listened to platform. I didn't realize how quickly Spotify's kind of popped up, because there for a long time it was the one of the lower tiers, but now it's like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and then they've random Android versions of whatever. But yeah, so yeah, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find it. My last name, Toomey, Toomey. Talk to me where you find me.
And I love that podcast name. It's so clever. And everyone, until next time, make like a bull and throw those horns up.
Hold on.